Part 34. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yuchi. Chapter 331. In the police station. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su had a look of reluctance in his eyes, and took out a talisman in a simple color from his sleeve, and then instructed the 5 companions around him. Immediately use the 5-element talisman given by Uncle Lechen. After hearing the reminder from the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su, the 5 foundation building masters also reluctantly took out a talisman, and then mobilized the Danshan spiritual power to drive the talisman. When Zhang Fengjai saw the sea of fire, forest, lake, mountain, and 2 golden swords transformed by the talisman, his face changed slightly, and a look of reluctance also appeared in his eyes. Because he found that the 4 natural environments and 2 golden swords transformed by the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su and others using the talisman were infinitely close to the 6th level of foundation building in power, far exceeding the first sword of the human sword given by the 3rd grandfather, so he could only continue to use the 2nd sword of the earth sword. Just the 7 foundation building masters of the Supernatural Research Institute needed to consume 2 sword energies of the human sword and the earth sword, which made him feel quite reluctant and distressed. But facing the natural environment and 2 golden swords transformed by the spell, no matter how reluctant and distressed he was, for his own safety and to protect the safety of Yang Hung and the other 3, he could only grit his teeth and mobilize the 2nd earth sword energy floating in his consciousness. 2 Tuesday. However, just when his mind was about to mobilize the 2nd earth sword energy, he heard a series of gunshots that suddenly sounded in his ears, and he looked up quickly. Then, he saw Yang Hung, Huang Yiwen, and a young criminal policeman holding a submachine gun with gritted teeth, madly shooting at the Taoist-robed old man and others who had their backs to them. Whether it was the backlash of the soul when the condensed weapon was destroyed, or the mobilization of spiritual power to control the natural environment and 2 golden swords transformed by the spell, the defensive awareness and defensive ability of the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su and others were reduced to the lowest. Therefore, when facing the crazy shooting of Yang Hung, Huang Yiwen, and Wang Yan, except for the strongest old man in Taoist robe surnamed Su and the middle-aged man who had practiced steel and iron bones who were slightly injured, the remaining 3 women and the thin young man were directly shot to death by the submachine gun. Hunting geese all day, but today the eyes were pecked by geese. Looking at the 4 companions lying in a pool of blood, thinking that they were shot to death by ordinary people using ordinary firearms, the old man in Taoist robe surnamed Su and the middle-aged man suddenly turned around and looked at Yang Hung and the other 3 with endless anger in their eyes. Huang Yiwen and Wang Yan, who had never been stared at with such a sharp look, stepped back a few steps in fear. Yang Hung glared at the other party without fear, and continued to hold up the submachine gun and planned to continue shooting. The owner of the driving spell died, and the natural environment transformed by the spell disappeared. Taking advantage of the gap between the forest and the golden sword, Zhang Fengjai immediately controlled the sword to penetrate the forest and directly stabbed the middle-aged man who was preparing to retaliate against Yang Hung. Puff. Looking at the heart pierced by the sword, the middle-aged man turned his head with a trace of regret in his eyes and looked at Zhang Fengjai, then his consciousness fell into the endless darkness and he fell to the ground and died. The death of the middle-aged man by the sword made the Taoist old man surnamed Su realize the danger of his situation immediately. He quickly retreated to the left, avoiding the strafing of Yang Hung and others, while continuing to control the forest transformed by the spell to cover Zhang Fengjai. The 5 elements are mutually reinforcing and mutually restraining, and none of them can be missing. The forest without the assistance of the sea of fire, mountains, lakes, and golden sword is no longer dangerous, so Zhang Fengjai controls the sword containing the sword energy of the first Taoist sword, constantly destroying the woods in the natural environment, and soon breaks the forest transformed by the spell. However, when he saw that the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su had taken advantage of the opportunity to retreat to the carport next to the wall of the police station while he was trapped in the forest, He immediately knew that the other party wanted to take the opportunity to escape. Not to mention that the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su was the person in charge of rescuing Garcia and encircling him this time, just based on his brutal killing of Detective Xiaolin just now, he must not be let off easily. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai immediately recalled the sword and performed the Qingfeng step to prepare for pursuit, when he suddenly heard 3 dull and suppressed gunshots. Along with the dull and suppressed gunshots, 3 lightning-fast red dots hit the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su, who had just taken off and was about to cross the carport and escape from the police station. Seeing the body of the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su smashing through the carport and then falling into the carport, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a trace of fear, and he immediately bowed to Yang Guozheng and said goodbye. "Director Yang, please call me directly after you have contacted the family of the murdered girl. I will take my leave now." Afterwards, without giving Yang Guozheng any chance to ask him to stay, he quickly rushed into the office building and then appeared behind the building through the emergency fire escape. However, he did not rush out in a hurry. Instead, he took out 9 talismans drawn with the blood of monsters from his sleeves, and transformed them into 5 cat monsters and 4 foxes that were good at speed, and let them rush out of the building at the same time. Bang, bang, bang. 9 dull and suppressed gunshots rang out in succession, and the cat monsters and foxes transformed by the talismans were instantly killed by the lightning-fast red dots. With the gap when the cat monsters and foxes were killed, Zhang Fengjai instantly burst out the extreme speed of the Qingfeng step, combined with the strength of his steel-like body, and directly smashed the wall of the backyard of the police station, and then used the dust raised by the wall to rush into the residential area as fast as the wind. Zhang Fengjai's slightly flustered farewell and his action of rushing directly into the office building made Yang Guozheng look puzzled. But when he heard 9 dull and oppressive sniper rifle sounds coming from the backyard, his face suddenly changed and he rushed into the yard and shouted loudly, "Stop it, the young man just now is one of us." However, in response to Yang Guozheng's loud reminder, he was responded by more than a dozen sniper rifle sounds in succession, which made him extremely annoyed. He immediately raised his submachine gun and fired wildly at the sky. At the same time, Huang Yiwen and Wang Yan, who were also unhappy, rushed to Yang Guozheng's side and also raised their submachine guns to fire at the sky. The piercing gunshots that cut through the sky and the dazzling red light formed by the bullets affected the sight and attention of the snipers around, allowing Zhang Fengjai to seize the opportunity to pass through 7 residential buildings in succession. Finally, he successfully rushed into a small park that was not very large but planted with a large number of trees. He suddenly stopped sprinting, turned around and looked through the branches around the police station, looking at a dozen suitable hiding places for snipers. Zhang Fengjai's face was as gloomy as water, and his eyes revealed a fierce murderous intent. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 332. In the small park. The reason why he immediately said goodbye to Yang Guozheng and rushed directly into the office building was because when the Taoist-robed old man surnamed Su was shot, he immediately felt at least a dozen fierce murderous intentions from all directions, locking onto a dozen fatal vital points all over his body. Although he could easily catch the bullets with his indestructible spiritual power and his strong body strength, the power of the bullets from the specially modified sniper rifle was no less than that of ordinary bombs. With his current cultivation and strength, he could only use the means of using the force to resist the simultaneous shooting of 3 to 4 sniper bullets. Unless his own cultivation can break through the foundation building stage, or the level of his strong body can be promoted to the great perfection stage. Thinking of how he used the life-saving trump card given by his third grandfather to save Yang Guozheng and the other 2 who were in mortal danger, but in the end he was attacked from behind by his own people, the endless anger in his heart made Zhang Fengjai suddenly think of assassinating the sniper secretly. But when he heard that the sound of submachine guns in the police station not only did not stop, but became more intense, he knew that Huang Yiwen and the young criminal policeman also joined the disturbance. A warm current suddenly emerged in his heart, and he finally couldn't help but sigh, and then gave up the idea of revenge. However, leaving so depressed and frustrated was not his style. So, he took out the remaining 6 talismans drawn with the blood of evil creatures from his sleeves, and then transformed into 4 cat demons and 2 grey foxes, and ordered them to poison the mastermind who had just ordered the sneak attack on him. After that, Zhang Fengjai turned around and performed the Qingfeng step and ran straight to Guanghe Huafu. After all the bullets in the submachine gun were used up, Yang Guozheng stopped shooting into the sky, and then looked up at the dozens of elite troops with live ammunition and fierce murderous aura that appeared at the door of the police station. "You go back to the duty room immediately." When he saw a middle-aged man in camouflage uniform and fierce-looking, leading his troops through the automatic telescopic door of the police station, Yang Guozheng gave an order to Huang Yiwen and Wang Yan, and then stepped towards the middle-aged man with a proud face. "Guozheng, a few charlatans have made you so embarrassed, which really damages your title of the best sharpshooter in the police academy." After signaling the troops around him to stay on standby, the middle-aged man walked towards Yang Guozheng and said sarcastically, "King Hua, why did you let the sniper sneak attack that young man just now?" Ignoring the other party's sarcasm, Yang Guozheng asked with a gloomy face. "A bunch of self-important charlatans. If they stay in the world, they will also pollute the air of the earth. Of course, I have the responsibility and obligation to clean up these self-righteous garbage." The middle-aged man called King Hua continued to sneer with disdain. After hearing his old classmate's evaluation of the monk who had just attacked the police station, Yang Qiushan's eyes flashed with a look of enlightenment. He knew that his old classmate who chose to continue to join the army after graduating from the police academy not only had a high status in the army, but also had access to secrets that he didn't know at all. However, when he was about to refute the old classmate's derogatory evaluation of Zhang Fengjai, whom he had always admired and respected, he was very dissatisfied, and 6 black shadows as fast as the wind rushed in front of the old classmate. Then, a black shadow exploded directly to form a black gas, and quickly enveloped the old classmate. Then, 4 black shadows quickly rushed into the large army, and also exploded instantly to form countless black gases, and then enveloped nearly 3/4 of the number of people. The only grey fox left at the scene took a deep breath and blew hard at the black gas. Then, whether it was a black gas covering King Hua or the black gas covering the army, they were all quickly blown away. At the same time, Zhang Fengjai, who had just left the small park, suddenly stopped and flashed into a residential area next to him, then sat cross-legged in the lush flowers and began to control the only remaining grey fox in the air. Seeing the old classmate lying flat on the ground after the black gas gradually dissipated, and nearly 40 elite soldiers who also fell to the ground, Yang Qiushan's face changed slightly and he asked the grey fox, "Zhang Xiao, please show mercy." At the beginning, when using the justice and fierce energy accumulated by the police station to deal with the blue python, Zhang Fengjai used the dozen cat demons and grey foxes transformed by the talisman to delay the attack of the blue python. So, when he saw the 4 cat demons and a grey fox that exploded, he knew that this was Zhang Fengjai's thunderous counter-attack after being ambushed, and revenge for the sniper attack on him by his old classmate. After looking at Yang Guozheng with a gentle look, the grey fox walked to King Hua with its paws, then raised its paws and stepped on his chest, suppressing its anger and said, "Since I set foot in the secular world and began to train, any villain who dares to repay kindness with enmity, any enemy who dares to sneak attack from behind, will either be directly twisted off by me, or I will extract the soul and torture it." When King Hua, who had not yet fainted, heard the grey fox's threat, a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. "This time I was obviously helping your friends and risking my life to deal with the Supernatural Research Institute, but you dared to take advantage of the situation and sneak attack from behind. I am afraid that only by extracting your soul and exposing it to the scorching sun for 3 days can I calm my anger." After hearing the revenge method given by the grey fox, The frightened look in his eyes was immediately replaced by begging. When King Hua opened his mouth to beg for mercy, he found that he could not say any words at all. The claws that were originally on his chest slowly moved to his forehead, and then a black evil gas gradually emerged from the claws. Young friend Zhang, King Hua's status is special. You must not make a big mistake, impulsively Yang Guozheng reminded him solemnly as he quickly rushed to King Hua's side, then reached out to hold the gray fox's paw. Director Yang, I dare to kill even the strong men from the Supernatural Research Institute. Do you think there is anything in this secular world that scares me? Turning to look directly at Yang Guozheng, the gray fox asked arrogantly. Young friend Zhang, King Hua and I are both classmates at the police academy and roommates in the same dormitory. We are also close friends. I hope you can take my face into consideration and spare his life mercifully. Gray Fox's arrogant and domineering reply made Yang Guozheng truly understand the extent of his inner anger, and he could only use the friendship and kindness between them to save the lives of his old classmates. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 333. In the police station. When hearing Yang Guozheng's request, recalling the other party's second life-saving grace at the critical moment, the gray fox sighed helplessly and retracted the claws pressing on King Hua's forehead, which also made Yang Guozheng couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But the narrow-minded King Hua immediately had a resentful idea of revenge. Because he had a secret weapon specially made by the Military Research Institute, it was not difficult to kill Zhang Fengjai secretly. Director Yang, today I can temporarily spare this guy's life for your sake. After giving enough face to Yang Guozheng, the gray fox suddenly changed his tone and continued. But the death penalty can be avoided, but the living crime cannot be escaped. Let the yinsha gas that just invaded continue to stay in his body. Zhang Xiao, will there be any serious impact? Yang Guozheng asked immediately, feeling bad. He looked up at the elite soldiers who kept fainting, and then looked down at King Hua who looked nervous. When the gray fox's body gradually began to become illusory, it left an answer that Yang Guozheng could barely accept, but King Hua's eyes were full of despair. No medical skills can help a person who has been bedridden for 3 years. In his 40s, he was in the golden age of youth and strength, and it was also the best time for his career to advance by leaps and bounds. The consequence of being bedridden for 3 years was not only to lose all opportunities for promotion, but also to ruin the military career he had fought for all his life. This made King Hua, who felt extremely desperate and regretful, roll his eyes and fainted directly. In response, Yang Guozheng could only sigh and shake his head, then waved to the few elite soldiers who were not affected by the black gas, and asked them to take King Hua back to the provincial capital as soon as possible to report. But what Zhang Fengjai didn't know was that he seemed to be retaliating against King Hua's punishment for attacking him, but he accidentally saved the other party's life. After all, how could the special status of the Supernatural Research Institute tolerate and forgive the murderer who assassinated the institute's foundation building masters, and he was also an ordinary person who looked down on them from the bottom of his heart. If he hadn't used the punishment method of Yinsha's invasion of the body to make King Hua unconscious and admitted to the hospital, he would have died in 1 day at the shortest and 2 days at the longest. After using the Qingfeng step to quickly leave the flowers, Zhang Fengjai finally met a taxi waiting for customers in front of a bath center called Shenga, and then took the taxi back to the villa. At this time, Xiao Yuxuan and Du Yui had already returned to their rooms to rest, so he quietly sneaked back to his room, took out a maple box from under the bed, and then sat cross-legged in front of the window-sill. Whether facing the 7 foundation building masters of the Supernatural Research Institute or encountering a sneak attack by a sniper, he felt that his cultivation and strength were too low, and he was gradually unable to cope with the increasingly complex situation. Therefore, he decided to minimize the time he spent outside, and then use the medicinal materials and 5-element spirit beads compensated by Rong Xiangtian to quickly reach the great perfection of steel bones and the peak of the 9th level of qi condensation. As long as the physical grade of steel bones is promoted to the great perfection, the sniper hidden in the dark will completely lose the threat. As long as the cultivation can be promoted to the peak of the 9th level of qi condensation, then the spirit beads condensed by the 4-spirit soul condensation array can be used to directly impact the foundation building stage. By then, relying on his own cultivation and strength, and then cooperating with the Taoist arts taught by the 3rd grandfather and the killing martial arts taught by the 2nd grandfather, he can be regarded as truly having the ability to protect himself. He opened the box in his hand, took out the 1,000-year-old ginseng placed in the box, and then swallowed it in his mouth and chewed it hard, and swallowed it directly into his stomach. Then, he began to use the body refining skills taught by the 2nd grandfather to improve the physical grade of steel bones. Time passed by every second. As the sun rises in the east, everything awakens. Zhang Fengjai, who is immersed in body training, is suddenly awakened by the ringing of the mobile phone in his pocket. He took a deep breath without taking out the phone for the time being, and then carefully felt the effect of the improvement of the physical grade. After a satisfied look flashed in his eyes, he reached out and took out the mobile phone that had rang twice. When he saw that the number displayed on the screen of the mobile phone was Zhuang Jian, he thought of the 7 foundation building masters of the Supernatural Research Institute who were killed early this morning, and he quickly answered the phone. Yezi, pack up your things and return to Rat Mountain. Just as the phone was connected, Zhuang Jian's slightly panicked voice came immediately. Teacher Zhuang, don't panic, tell me in detail what happened. Zhuang Jian's panicked reminder made Zhang Fengjai suddenly nervous, and he was eager to know why she asked him to leave immediately. Yezi, at about 2 a.m. today, you killed 7 foundation building masters in the city bureau, which completely angered the Supernatural Research Institute. The 7 leaders with the final decision-making power voted unanimously to pass the resolution to kill you. After taking a deep breath and trying to calm down her panic, Zhuang Jian explained in detail. Just 2 hours ago, Captain Su Zindong, who has the 6th level of foundation building cultivation, led 7 4th to 5th level foundation building masters and 13 1st to 3rd level foundation building masters to Ningji City by plane. In fact, as early as when he killed Wang Shishan and Li Tianyu, who were at the foundation building level, in Lala village, he was ready to bear the bloody revenge of the Supernatural Research Institute. This is one of the important reasons why he took advantage of the Mid-Autumn Festival to return to the Zhang family in Shushan and ask the 3 grandfathers and those special beings for a life-saving trump card. So, after hearing Zhuang Jian's explanation, he, who had many life-saving trump cards in his hand, was not panicked or afraid at all, but instead felt a little excited. As the saying goes, once, twice, but not 3 times. After experiencing the second crackdown by Lala village and the police station, the Supernatural Research Institute neither realized its own mistakes and errors, nor paid attention to its means of defeating the strong with the weak. Then, he hoped to use the third counterattack like a storm to give the Supernatural Research Institute a profound and unforgettable lesson, so that they would know that he, who seemed to be from a family and had no foundation, was actually an existence that they could not afford to provoke. Teacher Zhuang, when will Su Zindong and others arrive in Ningji City? After arriving in Ningji City, will they go to the police station to rescue Garcia first, or will they lead the team to encircle and suppress me with all their strength? There are still more than 4 months before the New Year's Eve, and the life-saving trump cards are disposable consumables that cannot be restored. Try to save as much as possible. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could use his advantage in modifying Feng Shui formations based on the whereabouts of Su Zindong and others to save the use of his life-saving trump card. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 334. Guanghe Huafu, in Villa Number 7. Yezi, since our city's airport is in Jiaxian County, we have to transfer to a bus to reach Ningji City smoothly, so Captain Su and his team will need about 5 hours. Through the means of killing Wang Xishan and Li Tianyu in Lala village, Zhuang Jian vaguely guessed Zhang Fenjai's plan, which made her feel nervous and worried, but also vaguely excited and expectant. Therefore, she revealed the whereabouts of Su Zindong and others in detail, hoping to provide Zhang Fenjai with useful information for arranging the Feng Shui formation. At the same time, the failure of the police rescue plan this morning has made the leaders aware of your danger, so Captain Su and his team's first task is to encircle you first, and then go to the municipal bureau to rescue Garcia. Teacher Chuang, I know, thank you for the timely information you provided, you should also be more careful. After hanging up the phone after the instructions, Zhang Fenjai showed a hint of hesitation in his eyes. In fact, more than 5 hours is enough to transform the layout of the Feng Shui formation, but now there is a problem that makes him feel a little tricky, that is, which Feng Shui treasure land to choose as the place to ambush Su Zindong and others. The most ideal Feng Shui treasure land is the police station that accumulates a lot of justice and evil energy. Yang Guo's Hung, who has the energy of justice and evil, only needs to draw 2 talismans that can be used to guide and gather energy in advance, and the rest of the things will be left to Yang Guo's Hung. But when Su Zindong and others arrived in Ningji City, it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, which was the peak time for the police station to work and handle cases. Whether from the perspective of the safety of ordinary people or the influence of social public opinion, it was not suitable as an ambush site. The second Feng Shui treasure land in the understanding is a children's playground with earth veins and fire in the city center. But it is also affected by time and environment, and it is not suitable as an ambush site. Then, after thinking about it, there is only a Feng Shui treasure land with a slightly remote location and some ordinary conditions. However, a Feng Shui treasure land with average conditions will directly reduce the power of the formation and ultimately affect the effect of the ambush. Therefore, if you want to use the Feng Shui layout with average conditions to ambush Su Zindong and others, you must use more external forces to transform it. Thinking of this, Zhang Fenjai slowly closed his eyes and thought about the materials needed to transform the Feng Shui layout. Suchain coal mine, located in the northeast of Ningji City, about 20 miles away from the city, is a dilapidated coal plant with coal energy about to run out and may close at any time. Since the factory leaders moved to the new coal mine 5 years ago, more and more coal miners have either gone to the new coal mine together or simply resigned to find another way out. Therefore, except for a dozen poor miners who have no skills and connections who have not left for the time being, most of the places in the entire mining area have become desolate. The coal washing area was originally the most prosperous place in the entire coal mine. Every day, there were nearly 100 heavy trucks waiting to pull coal out of the factory. But now, it has long been a deserted place with weeds and wild rabbits. Looking at the weeds that were almost waist-high in front of him, Zhang Fenjai put down a nylon bag on his back, then mobilized the spiritual power of his Danshan to open his eyes and observe the entire weeds and abandoned factory buildings. The more carefully he observed, the more surprise and excitement he had in his eyes. In the past, he had asked Zhu Zhenjun to drive a Bugatti Veyron sports car around the streets and alleys of Ningji City, specifically looking for a Feng Shui treasure land suitable for transformation. But due to time constraints, he only took a rough look at the Feng Shui luck of the coal washing area at that time, and found that the distribution of the 5 elements in this place was not only seriously unbalanced, but also the ratio of fire elements and earth elements was amazing. Fire is mainly for attack, and earth is mainly for defense. It is a Feng Shui treasure land that is more suitable for ambushing the enemy. Now, after careful observation with spiritual power to open the eyes of heaven, he found that the 5 elements in the coal washing area were not seriously unbalanced, but the 3 elements of gold, wood, and water in the 5 elements had long disappeared completely, leaving only an unimaginable amount of fire elements and earth elements. The fire element turns into a sea, and the earth gathers into a dragon. Perhaps I don't need to use my trump card to save my life, and I can completely kill Su Xindong and others after returning to the original position, Zhang Fengjai said to himself excitedly while looking at the large patch of weeds in front of him. However, at this moment, a puff of green smoke suddenly rose from the west of the coal washing area, and the smell of vegetables accompanying the green smoke gradually replaced the excitement in his eyes with solemnity. The feng shui layout of the fire element turning into a sea and the earth gathering into a dragon will not only cause a shocking scene, but also extract all the fire elements and earth elements in the entire mining area in a short period of time, which will eventually cause all plants to wither instantly, all animals to flee in panic, and most of the mining area to collapse. Such a result will inevitably affect the remaining dozen miners in the mining area dormitory. The closure of the coal mine has already caused their lives to fall into poverty and hardship. If they lose their place to live because of the collapse of the dormitory building, then he will not only commit an unforgivable sin, but also be condemned by his conscience. He took out his cell phone and checked the time, and found that there was still nearly 2 hours of preparation time before Su Xindong and others arrived. Zhang Fengjai hid the nylon bag containing the materials needed to transform the feng shui layout in the weeds, and then walked towards the mining dormitory building where green smoke was rising. The dormitory building in the mining area is less than a kilometer away from the coal washing area. With his amazing eyesight, after passing the dilapidated office building, he saw from a distance that in the open space in front of a dormitory building, a plump young woman was cooking on a stove built with red bricks and mud. At the same time, a little girl about 4 years old was making a fire. At the age of 4, her attention is not focused. After adding a handful of dried weeds, she would look up and glance around. She happened to see Zhang Fengjai walking over, and hurriedly whispered to the young woman to remind her. "Mom, someone is coming." "Who are you?" the young woman asked nervously, holding the cooking spatula with her right hand suddenly clenched. "Don't be nervous, sister, I'm just a passerby, asking for a cup of hot water." The other party's sudden nervous reaction made Zhang Fengjai feel puzzled, and he quickly made up a reason to stop. Perhaps because of his immature and ordinary appearance, or perhaps because of his simple and sincere smile, the young woman gradually relaxed her vigilance and gave instructions to the little girl. "Miizi, go get uncle a bowl of hot water." The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 335. Suchaim coal mine, in front of the dormitory building. Although the other party had relaxed his vigilance against him, in order to avoid causing misunderstandings again, Zhang Fengjai directly chose a green stone about 3 or 4 meters away from the stove and sat down and asked. "Sister, judging from the surrounding environment, is this coal mine closed?" Zhang Fengjai deliberately kept a distance, which made the young woman completely put down her guard and turned around to scoop up the green vegetables in the iron bowl, which did not have much oil and water at all, and said with a trace of sadness in her eyes. "On the 9th of last month, this coal mine was officially announced to be closed, and the entire mining area was rented to a factory that makes fireworks. Isn't this nonsense? Actually renting a mining area containing a large amount of fire elements to fireworks that are most taboo to open and hidden fires, isn't this a stupid act of self-destruction?" After hearing the young woman's explanation, a kind of annoyance of taking human life lightly made Zhang Fengjai unable to help but accuse. Although she didn't know why the thin young man in front of her suddenly got angry, she took 2 steps forward and took the hot water when she saw her daughter coming over. Then she handed it to Zhang Fengjai and told him. "Little brother, drink this glass of boiled water and leave quickly. Because after Mei Zi and I finish this meal, we will leave here forever." Reaching out to take the hot water handed over by the young woman, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but soften his heart when he saw the confusion and despair about the future in her eyes. Then he observed her appearance and fate. Although the poor and hard-working life took away her bright youth, the perfectly matched proportions of her facial features still made her exude a natural and attractive charm, which was definitely much better than those beauties who relied on makeup. Maybe it was because she had given birth to a child, which made her originally plump and charming figure even more proud. Especially the two huge peaks, which had a more visual impact. However, compared with her outstanding appearance and plump and proud figure, her fate in the first half of her life can be summarized by an idiom, that is, ill-fated. She lost her mother as a child, her father died when she was young, and her husband was buried when she was young. It can be said that she suffered the most miserable fate in the world. At the same time, the three palaces of wealth, and longevity were covered with dark clouds, indicating that her miserable fate was not only not over, but she would suffer more frustration and poverty. Alas! Retracting his gaze from the other person's face, Zhang Fengjie couldn't help but sigh and lower his head to drink water. As the saying goes, the happiness you enjoy in this life is the virtue you accumulated in your previous life. The suffering you suffer in this life is the sin you committed in your previous life. The tragic fate she encountered shows that she must have done some disasters that angered the heavens and people in her previous life, and the disasters have completely changed her fate. Unless a peerless master like the third grandfather, who is proficient in Taoism and the 8 diagrams of the I Ching, takes action personally and then uses the secret method of changing fate, she can forcibly change her current miserable fate. Uncle, do you know where to live for free? Just as he was lamenting the young woman's irreversible miserable fate, Mei Zi's voice full of desire suddenly came to his ears. Haven't you found a place to live yet? The young woman had clearly said that after eating this meal without much oil and water, she would leave the coal mine forever, and he thought that she had found a place to stay. Uncle, my mother and I don't have a penny, and we can't rent someone else's house. Mei Zi lowered her head and explained in a low voice. The 4-year-old girl not only had to endure the poor days of hunger and cold, but also had to suffer from the life of displacement and homelessness, which made Zhang Fengjie couldn't help but look at her with pity. But with just this one look, he was completely stunned. If her mother's tragic fate came from the sins she committed in her previous life, then Mei Zi's fate was the virtue accumulated in 9 lifetimes. She was born into a family that had committed sins in her previous life despite having a great fortune and wealth. This completely contrary to fate completely overturned his understanding of fate and luck. After taking a deep breath and calming down his slightly surprised emotions, he mobilized the spiritual power of Danshan to open the heavenly eye, and then re-observed the fate and luck of Mei Zi and her mother. Red comes from the heart, purple comes from the wooden box. Red and purple are entangled, and fate helps each other. After seeing the fate trend of Hui Zi and her mother under the gaze of the heavenly eye, Zhang Fengjie handed the cup in his hand to the young woman, and then walked to a human-powered tricycle not far from the stove. Then, he took out an old photo from a shabby student bag. When he saw the young man in the photo, he finally knew why Mei Zi, who had a great fortune and wealth, was born in a family that committed sins and was punished. The reason lies in the handsome and elegant young man in the photo. People say, your wife in this life is the one you buried in your previous life, to repay your unrequited kindness. Your daughter in this life is your lover in your previous life, to continue your unfinished love. According to the fate of the young man in the photo, combined with his understanding and speculation of karma, it should be that her father owed her mother an unrepayable favor in her previous life, and Mei Zi owed her father an unrepayable love, and finally used the luck of this life to offset the karma entanglement in the previous life. Uncle, can you give me back the photo? This is the only thing my father left me. Although the young woman kept signaling Mei Zi not to get close to Zhang Fengjie, Mei Zi, who was worried that the photo would be damaged, got rid of her mother's obstruction and rushed to his side to ask. Give it. While handing the photo to Mei Zi, Zhang Fengjie squatted down and asked. Mei Zi, do you want to have delicious food and drink every day? Do you want to wear beautiful clothes? Do you want to go to kindergarten like other children? Uncle, of course I do. Mei Zi, who still has the innocence of a child, nodded vigorously with a look of desire in her eyes. Standing up and touching Mei Zi's slightly yellow hair, Zhang Fengjai walked to the young woman, then took out a stack of about 4,000 cash from his pocket, handed it to her and told her, "Sister, take this money to rent a place to live first. I will find a way to find you a free house, and then you and Mei Zi will have difficulties in living in the future." Not only did the young woman not take the cash handed over by Zhang Fengjai, but she asked with strong vigilance in her eyes, "You have no relationship with us, why are you helping Mei Zi and me? Maybe it's because I feel sorry for you, or maybe it's because I can't bear to see the smart Mei Zi continue to suffer." Looking directly into the young woman's eyes, Zhang Fengjai explained sincerely, "Sister, don't worry, I have absolutely no ill will towards you. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 336. Suchame coal mine, in front of the dormitory building. Perhaps because of the sincere look in Zhang Fengjai's eyes, or perhaps because of the dilemma with no way out, the struggling look in her eyes was finally replaced by determination. The young woman reached out and took the cash, turned around and walked to the tricycle. Then, she took out a piece of colored pens and white paper that Mei Zi used to draw from her school bag, and then wrote an IOU with beautiful words. "Little brother, Zhao Shuocan lent you this money, and I will definitely pay it back to you in the shortest possible time. Okay." Knowing that if he did not accept the other party's method of repayment, the upright Zhao Shuocan would return the cash he had just received. Therefore, after reaching out to take the IOU and nodding, Zhang Fengjai lowered his head and glanced at the vegetables on the stove without much oil and water, and then persuaded, "Sister, Mei Zi is still young and it is a critical time for her body growth. She should eat as little of these non-nutritious things as possible in the future. All right." Looking at his daughter with slightly yellow hair and thin face, and then at the huge sum of money in her hand that she had never seen before, Zhao Shuocan finally gritted his teeth and nodded. Afterwards, she simply packed away the tableware on the stove, put them all into a bag and put them on the tricycle. Immediately afterwards, she bowed to him with Mei Zi and asked for his mobile phone number before getting on a tricycle and planning to leave. If it weren't for the lack of a place to stay, if it weren't for the plight of being penniless, she would have left the mining area with Mei Zi long ago. Because she knew very well what dirty thoughts the man who contracted the mining area had towards her. "Sister, apart from you and Mei Zi, are there any other families of miners in the mining area?" Zhao Shuocan's eagerness to leave the dormitory in the mining area was in line with his wishes, because he needed to transform the feng shui layout of the mining area to deal with the upcoming arrival of Su Zindong and others. It was precisely because he thought about improving the feng shui of the mining area that he suddenly realized the reason why he appeared in the dormitory building of the mining area, and quickly asked Zhao Shuocan who was about to leave. "There is none left." Shaking his head and looking at the dormitory building where he had lived for several years, Zhao Shuocan said with a trace of reluctance in his eyes. "Except me and Mei Zi, the last two families had moved away on the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival." After hearing Zhao Shuocan's reply, a look of surprise flashed in Zhang Fengjai's eyes. After waving and telling them to be careful on the road, he turned around and quickly returned to the coal washing area, and then retrieved the nylon bag hidden in the grass. "Open the nylon bag and pour out the talisman paper, incense burner, cloth bag, snake skin, jade flute, rooster, peachwood sword and a bundle of incense sticks contained in the bag. The rooster crows and the sun rises, and the sun sets the fire. Kill the chicken to get its blood, and use the blood to draw a fire symbol that can gather the fire elements in the mining area." After drawing a total of 9,999 fire talismans, he reached out and picked up the jade flute to play a song. Following the beautiful music, rustling sounds soon came from the grass, and then one after another huge gray mice appeared around him. "Please, brother rats, Please donate a drop of your blood to help me draw an earth talisman that can gather earth elements. After putting down the jade flute he was playing, Zhang Fengjai asked with his hands in hand. Without any hesitation, more than thousands of huge grey rats bit their tails and flung out a drop of blood, which then fell steadily into the porcelain bowl in front of him. Thank you all brother rats for your help. Looking at the rat blood that quickly filled the porcelain bowl, Zhang Fengjai thanked him with a cupped hand, and then reminded him solemnly. Brothers, I will be dealing with a group of powerful enemies here, which may cause the mining area to collapse and be destroyed. So for the sake of safety, you'd better leave the mining area immediately. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's reminder, thousands of huge grey mice squeaked in response and immediately turned around and returned to the grass. After the rats left, he quickly used the rat blood contributed by the rats to draw 990 earth talismans that could gather the earth element. Then, with the cooperation of Qingfeng Step, he buried the 9,999 fire charms he drew on all sides of the coal washing area. Immediately afterwards, he used his palm power to clear a clearing in the grass, and then buried the 999 earth talismans he drew around the clearing. He took out his cell phone and looked at the time and found that there were only 45 minutes left before Su Zindong and others arrived. He quickly poured the sand in the bag into the incense burner, and then buried the snake skin in the sand in the incense burner. Immediately afterwards, 16 wooden swords were neatly placed in front of the incense burner, a bundle of incense sticks was inserted directly into the sand of the incense burner, and then he sat cross-legged behind the incense burner with his knees bent. After using his spiritual power to light the incense stick, Zhang Fengjai slowly closed his eyes, formed mudra with his fingers, and softly recited a spell in his mouth. Therefore, always have no desire in order to observe the wonderful things. Always have desires in order to observe the wonderful things. Mysterious and mysterious, the door to all wonderful things. Originally, the green smoke from the incense should rise slowly, but as the incantation sounded, the rich green smoke was like a fountain. After rising to a height of 1 meter, the green smoke suddenly turned around and sank, and finally all gathered together in the sand of the incense burner. A medium-sized bus heading directly to Ningji City slowly stopped at the North Bus Station. When the door opened, the passengers and staff around the station were extremely surprised to find a group of people in particularly weird clothes walking out of the bus. Among them, there are Taoist priests wearing Taoist robes, successful people in suits and leather shoes, as well as beauties in flowing white clothes, flowing young people, and old men with silver hair. Zhuang Jian has met Captain Su, and all the masters and uncles. Zhuang Jian, who had been waiting in front of the station for a long time, hurriedly walked to the strangely dressed crowd, and then said respectfully, "Where's the car?" After looking at Zhuang Jian indifferently, Su Zindong, who was wearing a suit and leather shoes, asked in a cold tone. "Captain Su, the car has been prepared for a long time. Please come with me, senior uncles." It was not because of Su Zindong's indifference that Zhuang Jian was not dissatisfied at all. She still gestured respectfully. Then, she took Su Zindong and others to the roadside north of the bus station, pointing to a luxury business bus that could seat more than 20 people. "Captain Su, this is a business bus that I purchased temporarily. It can be destroyed immediately after use, so you don't need to take care of it while using it." With a look of satisfaction flashing in his eyes, Su Zindong walked towards the brand new business bus. Zhuang Jian ran to the front of the bus first, opened the door with the key, and took the initiative to sit in the driver's seat. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 337. North Bus Station in Ningji City. When seeing Zhuang Jian sitting in the driver's seat, Su Zindong, who was walking in the business bus, ordered with a cold light in his eyes. "Xiao Shuang, you stay to take care of junior sister Hanlin, and let junior brother Qingshuang drive." "Yes, Captain Su." Although she suddenly felt very nervous, Zhuang Jian tried her best to pretend to be calm and replied, Then, she quickly got up and got off the car and came to a woman wearing a white dress and a charming temperament, and greeted her respectfully. Zhuang Jian meets Uncle Hanlin. Yes. Nodding indifferently, Hanlin looked at Zhuang Jian with contempt and ordered. Arrange a luxury suite in a 5-star hotel for me, I want to meditate and rest. Jian obeys. After reaching out to call a taxi and taking the initiative to sit in the co-pilot's seat, Zhuang Jian felt extremely anxious under her seemingly calm face. Originally, according to her initial plan, she was going to drive Su Zindong and others to find Zhang Fengjai. Because of the tacit understanding she and Zhang Fengjai had developed, they could sense her approach in the first place, so they could prepare for an ambush in advance. At the same time, if there was an unexpected change during the ambush, she could also help in time. But Su Zindong not only refused her plan to lead the way personally, but also left Han Lan, who had reached the 3rd level of foundation building, to monitor him, thus losing the hope of using the mobile phone to inform Zhang Fengjai. At the same time, from Su Zindong's indifferent attitude towards her just now, she could also guess that the leader of the Supernatural Research Institute might have begun to doubt the relationship between her and Zhang Fengjai, which made her worry. However, she was not worried about her career, but worried about whether Zhang Fengjai could deal with Su Zindong and others who were well prepared. After all, among the foundation building masters who went to encircle and suppress this time, there were both Feng Shui masters who were proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements, and insidious masters who specialized in studying poison. Such aim coal mine, coal washing area. Zhang Fengjai, who had finished casting the spell, looked at the incense stick that had burned for nearly 40 minutes before it finally went out, and quickly got up and grabbed the incense ash left after the incense stick burned, and then sprinkled it on the swords of the 16 peachwood swords. Then, he returned to the position where he had just sat cross-legged, and then took out his mobile phone to check the time. When he found that there were only 5 minutes left before Su Zindong and others arrived at the coal mine, he couldn't help but frowned. Although there was no agreement to tip off each other during the early morning call, according to the tacit understanding formed between him and Zhuang Jian should also quietly call or send a text message to inform herself when Su Zindong and others arrived in Ningji City. But until now, she has neither called nor sent a text message, which means that she either accompanied Su Zindong and others and had no time to call, or she was unable to call or send a text message under surveillance. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai quickly put away his phone, took out a warm jade gifted by Zhuang Jian, and then held it in his palm and began to calculate carefully. The evil star is approaching, and the main star is lurking. With the close surveillance of the strong around him, he can only wait patiently for the opportunity temporarily. When calculating the dilemma Zhuang Jian was facing at this time, Zhang Fengjai slowly opened his eyes, and a trace of worry appeared in his eyes. Since the Supernatural Research Institute specially sent people to monitor, it means that the other party began to suspect that Zhuang Jian was secretly colluding with him, and had already had murderous intentions towards her. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible to send a strong man in the foundation building realm to monitor a young cultivator who only had the 4th level of qi condensation. At the same time, according to the hexagram of the evil star shining and the main star dimming in the calculation process just now, he can be sure that Zhuang Jian's safety is closely related to the next ambush. If Su Zindong and others were killed or captured during the ambush, then Zhuang Jian, who had lost the motivation to betray the Supernatural Research Institute, would be able to stay in Ningji City without worries and be responsible for handling the supernatural phenomena in Ningji City. If Su Zindong and others were killed or captured during the ambush, then the foundation building expert who was responsible for monitoring Zhuang Jian would either assassinate her directly or capture her alive to exchange for Su Zindong and others. After taking a deep breath and slowly exhaling, Zhang Fengjai cut his finger and squeezed out a drop of blood, then dripped it into the sand of the incense burner in front of him. Then, he stood up and walked to the edge of the cleared space, reached out and dug out a buried earth talisman, returned to the incense burner and sat cross-legged, then slowly closed his eyes and waited silently. Just as the luxury business bus carrying Su Zindong and others passed the overpass and turned into the cement road leading to the Suchame coal mine, a black car and two silver-white vans slowly drove in from the back door of the mining area and stopped in front of the dilapidated office building. Then, a man and a woman got out of the black car. The man was about 50 years old, slightly ugly, but extremely fierce. The woman was about 20 years old, with a beautiful face and a devilish figure, and she hugged the man's arm tightly, with an admiring look in her eyes. Then, a dozen young and middle-aged people wearing black long-sleeved shirts and carrying pistols and submachine guns got out of the two silver vans. "Hyuze, you did a good job." Looking at the quiet and desolate mining area in front of him, the ugly man nodded with satisfaction and praised a bald middle-aged man with a pistol stuck in his back. Walking to the man in 2 or 3 steps, the bald man called Hyuze said modestly with a happy smile on his face. "It's all because of your good teaching, otherwise, how could I, a rough man who only knows how to fight and kill, know the strategy of hiding from others? Hyuze, after returning to the provincial capital, you can choose the top card in the beauty club." Reaching out and patting Hyuze's bald head, the man called the boss smiled and rewarded him. "Thank you, boss, thank you, boss." Hyuze, who immediately showed an excited look on his face, quickly bent over to thank him, but couldn't help but glance at the girl with the devilish figure, and a trace of naked greed flashed in his eyes. The man who didn't notice Hyuze peeping at his woman turned his head to a young man standing next to the car and asked with a slightly excited look. "Hey Dao, how is the goods prepared?" "3 artifacts unearthed from the Zhou dynasty, and a notebook that can transfer money at any time," the young man called Heidao replied, patting the trunk of the car. "Junzi, how is the firepower prepared?" Turning his head to a young man who was observing the surrounding environment, the man asked a little nervously. 3 snipers are in place, 6 submachine guns and 8 .92 type pistols are loaded and ready to fire at any time. The young man called Junzi patted the submachine gun in his hand and replied with a cold expression. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 338. Suchame coal mine, in front of the destroyed office building. After getting the agreement from his men, the man nodded with satisfaction, then closed his eyes and waited silently. Chirp. The waiting time was not very long, only about 3 minutes, and the cheerful call of the magpie suddenly sounded from the abandoned canteen next to the mining area. When Zhang Fengjai suddenly opened his eyes and heard the sudden call of the magpie in the mining area, a look of doubt flashed in his eyes. Not to mention that the mining area with the missing 5 elements is no longer suitable for the survival environment of beneficial birds like magpies. At the moment when the incense in the incense burner was lit and the fire element and the earth element were bound, whether it was the hare in the weeds, or the rats, snakes and insects in the mining area, they had already fled the mining area in panic. At this moment, it was impossible for any birds to appear. So, feeling that something was a bit unusual, he got up and left the weeds directly, and then quietly lurked along the bird sound that was obviously made by ventriloquism. When the man heard the magpie call coming from the gate of the mining area, he suddenly opened his eyes, a look of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he immediately waved to the people behind him. Except for Hu Zi and Jun Zi holding submachine guns, and Hai Tao standing next to the car, the rest of the people immediately scattered and hid. Just when those black-clothed youths holding firearms had just hidden themselves, and when Zhang Fengjai quietly lurked next to a willow tree about 30 meters away from the office building, a luxurious business bus slowly stopped in front of the office building. When the door of the business bus opened, an old man with silver hair and wearing a tang suit slowly got off the bus. When Zhang Fengjai saw the old man in a tang suit getting off the bus, he suddenly became nervous and excited, and the man called the eldest brother greeted him with a smile on his face. "I guess you are the old man seen who is known as the Ghost Eye. Who are you?" Looking at the ugly man who greeted him enthusiastically, the old man in the tang suit asked with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Ha ha. After laughing twice, the man motioned to the woman beside him to let go of his arm, and then he introduced himself with a bow. My surname is Wu, and my given name is Lu. I am the 38th deputy leader of the thief sect, and I am also the person responsible for trading with you this time. Get lost. Just as Wu Lu's voice of self-introduction fell, a cold shout suddenly came from the business bus. Accompanied by the cold shout, a middle-aged man in a suit stepped out of the business bus. Whether it was the powerful aura exuded or the respectful look immediately shown by the old man in tang suit, Zhang Fenjai, who was hiding behind the willow tree, knew that the middle-aged man in a suit in front of him was Su Zindong, who was responsible for killing him this time and had reached the 6th level of foundation building. So, he immediately restrained his own breath to avoid attracting the other party's attention. As the saying goes, even if the deal is not successful, the righteousness remains. Su Zindong's cold shout replaced the smile on Wu Lu's face with a gloomy tone, and threatened in a gloomy tone. Our transaction has not started yet, and our friends treat us like this. Aren't you afraid that we will turn around and leave immediately? Noisy. After a flash of displeasure in his eyes, Su Zindong ordered the old man in tang suit. Brother Tao, clean up as soon as possible, don't affect the next task. Yes, Captain. After bowing and responding, a long knife suddenly appeared in the hands of the old man in tang suit, and then he rushed towards Wu Lu and others at a sudden speed. Bang! But just when the old man in tang suit, who was accelerating suddenly, was less than 3 meters away from Wu Lu, a dull and suppressed gunshot suddenly sounded in the mining area. Then, a red dot as fast as lightning directly pierced through the old man in tang suit's eyebrows, causing him to continue to sprint forward for less than 2 meters before falling to the ground and dying. Looking at his subordinates who fell to the ground and died, Su Zindong and the 18 foundation building masters who were about to get off the car were completely stunned. Because they never expected that there were snipers hidden in the abandoned mining area who could harm the cultivators in the foundation building realm, so that the old man in tang suit who had no defense at all died in the sniper's sneak attack. Now, they have not even seen Zhang Fenjai, who was responsible for the killing, and they have directly lost a strong man and colleague in the first level of foundation building, and they are ordinary people whom they usually look down upon. How can this not make Su Zindong and others feel extremely angry? Everyone listen to my order. Su Zindong, who let his anger boil in his heart, shouted at the people who rushed down the bus quickly. I will make their souls and bodies annihilated, and they will never be reborn. Yes. After the 18 strong men in the foundation building realm responded loudly, they gathered their own weapons and rushed towards Wu Lu and others with murderous intent. Seeing the opponent rushing with cold weapons, Wu Lu, with a flash of disdain in his eyes, nodded to Junzi and Huzi behind him. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Immediately afterwards, Junzi and Huzi, as well as the black-clad men scattered around, began to fire at full speed. Wu Lu, who had originally planned to take the woman back to the car, saw that the bullets from the submachine gun and pistol were easily caught and crushed by the opponents who rushed over, and a look of horror immediately flashed in his eyes. However, the look of horror did not last long, and he was beheaded by a young man in a casual suit at a whirlwind speed. Originally, the young man in a casual suit wanted to kill the woman next to Wu Lu, but he was attracted by her stunning appearance and devilish figure. He reached out and knocked the woman unconscious and threw her into the black car, intending to be intimate with her after completing the task of killing Zhang Fenjai. Ordinary submachine guns and pistols are no threat to the strong men in the foundation building realm. The only sniper rifle that was threatening was killed by the strongest Su Zindong with a hidden weapon because of the small number and the exposure of the hidden position. So, after seeing that Su Zindong and others would not suffer any damage, Zhang Fenjai quietly left the willow tree and returned to the weeds. Boom! Boom! But just as he was sitting cross-legged behind the incense burner, two deafening roars suddenly sounded in front of the office building. Accompanying the deafening roar was Su Zindong's extremely angry roar. Ah! Damn it! It seems that another strong man in the Foundation building realm died in the explosion of the bomb just now, otherwise Su Zindong would never be so angry. After talking to himself with a hint of surprise in his eyes, Zhang Fengjai looked at the sand in the incense burner and the 16 peachwood swords in front of the incense burner, and the surprise in his eyes was gradually replaced by excitement. Then, he took a deep breath, forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart, and condensed his 10 fingers into a hand gesture to drive the fire talisman at any time, and then waited quietly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 339. Suchame coal mine, in front of the grass in the coal washing area. The waiting time was not very long, only about 30 seconds. Su Zindong, with a gloomy face, appeared in front of the grass with 16 subordinates who looked slightly embarrassed. Senior Su, 3 generals were killed before the war even started. It seems like this is a bad sign for you. Zhang Fengjai was surprised when he saw that the explosion just killed 2 of the opponent's strong foundation builders. While surprised, he couldn't help but laugh and joke. Boy, you are Zhang Fengjai, a casual cultivator. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's teasing, Su Zindong, who was originally very depressed, almost took action out of anger. However, after seeing the incense burner placed in front of Zhang Fengjai and thinking of Wang Xishan and Li Tianyu who died in the Feng Shui formation, he took a deep breath, tried his best to adjust his depressed mood, and asked with a hint of arrogance in his tone. That's right. This junior is Zhang Fengjai. Without paying any attention to Su Zindong's arrogant and questioning tone, Zhang Fengjai nodded and admitted with a smile on his face. Since the establishment of the Supernatural Research Institute, no matter the sect leaders of the 10 major Taoist sects, the 7 demon kings among the monsters, or the 4 heavenly kings among the casual cultivators, they have not dared to offend the people of our Supernatural Research Institute easily. Zhang Fengjai's overly leisurely performance made Su Zindong feel a little unhappy for no reason, and at the same time, he questioned him more arrogantly and rudely. Boy, I don't know who gave you the courage to dare to offend and massacre the powerful people in our Supernatural Research Institute. As the saying goes, if the sky is crazy, there will be rain, if people are crazy, there will be disaster. Even the 3rd grandfather who looked down on the Supernatural Research Institute did not dare to despise the masters of the 10 major sects of Taoism. He had to show respect to the 7 demon kings and the 4 heavenly kings. Su Zindong's contempt and arrogance towards these famous seniors made Zhang Fengjai gradually put away. He warned with a smile on his face. Senior Su, don't be too arrogant in your life and actions. You need to know that the ripe grain always bends down, and the wise man is always gentle. Walking in the world, being low-key and humble is the key to survival. Ha ha. Facing Zhang Fengjai's relatively mild warning, Su Zindong suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. Su Zindong, who laughed wildly for nearly a minute, suddenly stopped laughing and said mockingly without hiding the contempt in his eyes. Boy, who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to warn and teach me? If God wants a person to perish, he must first make him ignorant and crazy. Therefore, facing Su Zindong's reckless ridicule, Zhang Fengjai completely stopped trying to find out the information about Zhuang Jian's foundation building powerhouse, and decided to continue to act according to the pre-planned plan. Su, whether I am qualified to give a warning or not is not something you, an arrogant guy, can judge. Looking at Su Zindong with a deliberately contemptuous look in his eyes, Zhang Fengjai said arrogantly and provocatively. If you feel unconvinced, you can take this group of rubbish and give it a try. However, In the face of Zhang Fenjai's humiliation and provocation, Su Zindong not only did not take action angrily, but instead sneered twice and turned to look at a white-haired old man wearing a blue Taoist robe and holding a compass in his hand. "Captain, the content of the 5 elements here is seriously imbalanced. The 2 elements of fire and earth occupy a very high ratio." When Zhu noticed Su Zindong's gaze, the white-haired old man holding the compass quickly explained. "At the same time, based on the fact that all the violent fire elements and heavy earth elements in the entire mining area are bound in the grass, I guess Zhang Fenjai should use a large number of fire talismans and earth talismans to gather them, and then use the method of condensing physical objects to gather them. Deal with us." When Zhang Fenjai heard the white-haired old man's explanation, he couldn't help but change his face, and a look of fear and nervousness flashed in his eyes. Because he did not expect that among the strong men sent by the Supernatural Research Institute for the 3rd time, there would be masters who were proficient in yin-yang and 5 elements feng shui, and they could clearly see his own means of transforming the feng shui layout. Su Zindong, who had a happy smile on his face, quickly asked, "Senior Brother Chiu, what type of physical object will the feng shui formation eventually condense? What level of strength will the condensed physical object reach?" "Captain, the 2 elements of fire and earth are the same as the spiritual power we cultivate. When restrained and controlled, the master who can control the elemental energy can condense whatever kind of physical object he wants." Perhaps because he felt that the reply just now was too strong, the old man surnamed Chiu tried to keep his tone gentle and confident as he continued to explain. "However, according to the cultivation level of the kid in front of me during the chi condensation stage, combined with the violent characteristics of the 2 elements, the physical object he can condense will not exceed the 3rd level of foundation building at most." The unhappy look in his eyes was instantly replaced by joy. Su Zindong turned his head and gave instructions to the young man in a casual suit. "Junior Brother Penjaiu, go try this boy's strength." "As you command." After giving a hand gesture, the young man in a casual suit who had reached the 3rd level of foundation building did not take the risk of rushing into the grass. Instead, he mobilized the spiritual power of his dantian to condense a giant blue python with a body length of nearly 20 meters to test. Although the other party could see the means of modifying the feng shui formation, he made a fatal mistake in judging the power of the modified feng shui formation. This also made Zhang Fenjai, who was originally nervous and fearful, secretly relieved. However, Su Zindong, who seemed arrogant, was very cautious and only sent one of his men to test, which made him frown. Because the drive of the feng shui formation is fully explosive, if Su Zindong and others do not all enter the range of the feng shui formation, then the sea of fire and earth dragons condensed from the elements of the formation will not be able to deal with people outside the formation. More importantly, the opponent has a master who is also proficient in the yin-yang 5 elements feng shui formation. According to the energy fluctuations when the feng shui formation is activated, he can quickly find the weak flaws of the feng shui formation, thereby destroying it from the outside. Therefore, facing the green giant python gathered by the young people in casual suits, he had to use the second trump card he had prepared in advance and use thunderous means to kill the green giant python, thereby provoking Su Zindong and others to rush into the grass and duel with him. After quietly dispersing the hand skills that had condensed the driving fire talisman in advance, he recondensed the sword skills of Wuji swordsmanship and began to control the 16 peachwood swords in front of the incense burner. Heaven and earth are infinite, and the universe borrows the law. As Zhang Fenjai pinched his mouth and recited a curse, 16 peachwood swords stained with incense and incense ash immediately rose into the air, and at the same time, they directly faced the charging cyan python with a pointed attack pattern of 1, 3, 5, 7. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 340. Suchame coal mine, in front of the grass in the coal washing area. Seeing the mahogany sword stabbing at him as fast as the wind, the giant cyan python, whose strength had reached the peak of the first level of foundation building, quickly swung its python tail and slapped the first mahogany sword hard. Bang! While the first peachwood sword was directly knocked away, the python tail quickly swung back and then whipped towards the 3 peachwood swords in the second echelon. Although 2 of the 3 peachwood swords in the second echelon were knocked away by the python's tail, the remaining third peachwood sword avoided the python's tail and directly stabbed the body of the cyan python. However, the giant blue python with condensed spiritual power had no consciousness, so it did not panic at all when the peachwood sword stabbed its body. It continued to swing its python tail and hit the 5 peachwood swords in the third echelon. Having no consciousness does not mean that there is no harm. The wood energy and earth element energy contained in the peachwood sword directly reduced nearly 1/10 of the strength of the cyan python, which also caused the python's tail to fly away. Only 1 peachwood sword in the third echelon. The remaining 4 mahogany swords and the 7 mahogany swords from the 4th echelon directly turned the giant cyan python into a hedgehog. Junior brother Penjio, there is no need to worry about the mistake just now. Seeing Penyu's face gradually darkening, the old man surnamed Chiu smiled and comforted him. The reason why the peachwood sword controlled by the opponent is able to defeat the spiritual objects is not because of how powerful he is, nor how unpredictable the sword technique he performs, but because the 16 peachwood swords contain the power gathered in the mining area. Lots of earth. If it's a head-on fight, this kid is no match for you. After comforting the young man in casual suit, the old man named Chiu put away his compass and suggested to Su Zindong. Captain, the modified Feng Shui formation can only exert the power of the 3rd level of foundation building at most. Next, you can kill the boy named Zhang. After hearing the instructions from the old man surnamed Chiu, Su Zindong quickly raised his right hand and waved hard at everyone, and then gave instructions loudly. We are besieged from all sides. We must not let the boy named Zhang escape. Looking at Su Zindong and others who suddenly launched an all-out attack, a puzzled look flashed in Zhang Fenjai's eyes. Originally, he wanted to use thunderous means to kill the giant cyan python, then use verbal provocation and humiliation to completely anger Su Zindong and others, and then make them rush into the Feng Shui formation in anger and impulsiveness. However, doubts are doubts, and incomprehensions are incomprehensible. Now that Su Zindong and others have rushed into the range of the Feng Shui formation, it's time for him to start killing people. He quickly condensed the hand that drives the fire talisman, and then imprinted it directly on the ground under his feet, and let out a loud roar. The fire element transforms into the sea. Along with Zhang Fenjai's roar, 4 waves of fire suddenly appeared around the grass. Immediately afterwards, the fire wave instantly enveloped the entire grassland with the force of a spark of fire, which also made Su Zindong and others couldn't help but change their expressions. But at this moment, the warning voice of the old man named Chiu suddenly came from the sea of fire. Don't panic, everyone. This is just a sea of fire formed by using the fire talisman to drive the fire element. At most, it has the power of the first layer of foundation building. The body can be protected by spiritual power to withstand the damage of the sea of fire and flames. Just when the voice of the old man named Chiu had just finished, Su Zindong, who used his spiritual power to condense a long knife, shouted and ordered. Use all your strength to kill Zhang Fenjai as quickly as possible. However, the voices that responded to his instructions were not the foundation building experts from the Supernatural Research Institute, but the same violent shouts from Zhang Fenjai. Tu Yuan transforms into a dragon. Along with Zhang Fenjai's loud shouts, the sand in the incense burner in front of him suddenly shook, and as the sand shook, a grey dragon with a head like a snake, horns like a deer, eyes like a rabbit, and ears like a cow, emerged from the incense burner. He quickly jumped out of the sand, then flew into the sky into the sea of fire. Originally a small grey dragon with a body length of only a dozen centimeters, it quickly became a majestic grey dragon with a body length of nearly 40 meters as it swelled in the wind. Ouch! After raising its head to the sky and letting out a deafening roar, the giant grey dragon rushed directly towards a woman in white who only had the first level of foundation building. Ah! With just a simple dragon's tail swing, the woman in white let out a scream, and her delicate body was directly turned into a mist. Fire UN transforms into the sea, Earth UN transforms into the dragon. This is the 5 elements god-destroying formation from Longhu Mountain, one of the top 10 Feng Shui formations. The old man surnamed Qiu, who used the disc to immobilize the flames of the Sea of Fire, looked at the grey dragon that easily killed the woman in white. He recalled Zhang Fenjai's roar when he activated the Feng Shui formation just now, and a flash of light suddenly flashed in his mind, making him unable to bear it. The resident screamed out loud. Immediately afterwards, he turned around and fled to the edge of the Feng Shui formation, while loudly reminding Su Zindong and others. Captain, fellow junior brothers and sisters, this is the 5 elements god-destroying formation from Longhu Mountain Zhenzhong Feng Shui formation. Its power has reached the peak of the 7th level of foundation building. It is no longer something we can deal with. Puff. But before the old man surnamed Qiu finished speaking, 16 mahogany swords came from all directions and killed him directly as a hedgehog. In fact, just when the earth element condensed into a grey dragon that could automatically hunt down the enemy, Zhang Fenjai immediately controlled 16 peachwood swords to assassinate the old man named Qiu. Because a fire talisman on the outside of the grass was removed before taking action, a weak flaw appeared in the entire Feng Shui formation. Although this tiny flaw will not affect the operation and power of the formation, it is easy to be discovered by the old man surnamed Qiu, who is also proficient in Feng Shui formation, and the entire Feng Shui formation can be cracked through this tiny flaw. Looking at the old man surnamed Qiu, who was stabbed into a hedgehog by the peachwood sword, Zhang Fenjai breathed a sigh of relief and continued to drive the peachwood sword to cooperate with the grey dragon to start chasing the foundation building masters who seemed to escape to the edge of the formation but actually did not leave the original place. The 7 foundation building masters from the 1st to 3rd levels did not use his help at all, and were all beaten into meat mist by the twitching dragon tail of the grey dragon. The 6 foundation building masters from the 4th and 5th levels were completely killed in 7 minutes by the main attack of the grey dragon and the sneak attack of the 16 peachwood swords. At this moment, only Su Zindong was left, swinging his long sword with all his strength to avoid the sea of fire in front of him and constantly approaching the edge of the weeds. "Senior Su, don't rush to leave," Zhang Fenjai laughed and teased as he left the incense burner and hid in the sea of fire. "Young man, if you don't want to be retaliated by our Supernatural Research Institute, just remove the Feng Shui formation and surrender." After stopping swinging his knife to avoid the sea of fire, Su Zindong threatened with a gloomy face.